Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. Today is the 28th of September 2021. These are the stories that will be talked about during the course of this show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with today's date. That is September, of course, the 29th. And just 1 month back, on August the 29th, a drone attack in Kabul killed 10 civilians. That included children as well. In the beginning, of course, the whole the drone attack was shown by the US as it had targeted IS Khorasan, but in fact what had happened was that it had killed Afghan civilians, and that was something that was admitted by the Pentagon very late. But today as well, the Afghan Taliban have accused the US forces of violating the Afghan airspace and have called for upholding commitments that were made in Doha. This is also 1 month after this drone attack that killed the civilians. This is going to be our second segment. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about Germany and the 2021 German Bundestag election results that have come out that put the SPD party, that is that of Olaf Scholz, with the 206 seats that he has won, 25.7% of vote, and that puts the party of Angela Merkel, of course, not in first place anymore. What is that going to bode as far as the future of Germany is concerned? This is our third segment. Then we'll talk about the state of Palestine that has issued a statement through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has talked about the British opposition Labour Party that held a meeting in Brighton in southern England and passed a resolution that supported the use of sanctions against Israel and called for the immediate recognition of the state of Palestine. This happened in an event, and of course this was lauded by the government of the state of Palestine in an official release. And then finally we'll talk about COVID-19. What is looming ahead as far as the future of this pandemic is concerned, whether it be in Pakistan or the world? What do the next 6 months pose as issues as far as COVID-19 is concerned? The biggest, apparently, it seems, is the lack of vaccination by the people across the globe. Let's begin with the discussion on the latest elections that have been held in Germany. And of course, the results show that the SPD party of Olaf Scholz has won 206 seats, that is 25.7% votes. That is followed by the CDU-CSU of Armin Laschet with 196 seats and Grün with 118 seats. To talk more about that, we've been joined by Maqbool Malik, senior editor, Deutsche Welle, Germany. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. The elections, the results, were they predictable?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. The results were not predictable, but they are also not what you could call earth-shaking or totally unexpected, because if we just look at the recent history of German government building after the elections, then the last 2 terms, when Angela Merkel, she became a chancellor, then it was the result of actually a coalition government of the 2 largest political parties in Bundestag, which actually over the decades have been each other's biggest political rivals. But
what does it bode now for the future of Germany? Because, you know, Angela Merkel, for example, was an iconic figure, not only for Germany, but for the world as well. Now that she no longer is contesting and she leaves her political career after 16 years, but nevertheless, she's going to remain until and unless a new coalition is formed. What does that leave with the new turn as far as the governance in Germany is concerned? Do you foresee changes in Germany?
Well, for this question, I would say half yes, half no. And I can explain that. There will be changes in the way German government works, but not in terms of system and political structure. Because to be honest, we are not talking about some apparent democracy in some underdeveloped African country. We are talking about democracy and new government building in Federal Republic of Germany, which had already shown the world multiple miracles in the previous decades. I mean, if you just go a tiny bit back, I mean, after World War II, the way Germany rose up on its feet with its economic wonder and miracle, and the way they have strengthened their democracy over the decades. So this recent result of the election is not going to end up in the formation of a government that would be radically different in its course and
But will
path
there be
from the
certain
way
differences
taken
from
by
the previous government? Do you foresee certain differences as far as maybe decisions taken by the previous government are concerned, maybe an amendments to certain laws? Do you foresee that? Because the Social Democrats, do you feel that they are a bit different from the previous government?
I can try to explain that. Yes, of course. The thing is, in Germany, we do not have a tradition of one government trying to undo the legislation of its predecessor.
All right.
Because the legislation is done by the parliament and the parliamentarians, the elected representatives of the people. When they do vote for certain legislation of any kind and nature, what they do is that they try to vote according to their conscience. It is not that you see people crossing the floor, and just one government in power today, and then they will say yes for the vote, and the next government comes and they will just repeal that law. This doesn't happen. But Merkel's rule, now 16 years, 4 terms of 4 year each, they were defined by CDU, which is a Christian conservative party. And it is basically an alliance of two conservative Christian parties. One is CDU, the largest in 15 of the 16 German provinces. And then there is a sister party in the southern German province of Bavaria, for which the capital is München. There, it is ruled by CSU. So there are these two sister parties. In German political system, we call them union parties. So they are both Christian Democrats or Christian Social Union. So they are more like conservatives. And the SPD is a social democratic party. It is a little bit from the center to the left. But unions, they are on the right of the center. So they are a little bit more conservative. They cannot take so bold decisions as would radically change the whole scenario of German political system. So
All right.
SPD, Social Democratic Party, is always a pro-worker party. And let me please remind you quickly that in Germany, SPD is the oldest political party. I mean, it is
All right.
with a history of more than a century. So sad thing is that during the previous two elections, actually four, they were not able to overtake the majority polled by CDU-CSU. So it is after 16 years that the SPD, the Social Democrats, they stand a great chance, a good chance, that they will make the next government, and their chancellorship candidate, Olaf Scholz, is, in my opinion, going to be the person, the German leader, who the world is going to see as the future democratically elected Chancellor of Federal Republic of Germany. And his political preferences, of course, they would be different, but not radically different, to be underlined. Of course, different, but not radically different from the policies pursued by Merkel 16 years of rule, because this government is now possibly going to be constituted on the basis of an alliance between three parties. One is Social Democrats, for which the leader is Olaf Scholz, already a chancellor candidate and a very strong one. And second is the Environmental Greens Party.
All right, Maqbool Sahab, I'd like to ask an interesting question that comes to mind. 16 years, why did the Social Democrats not come into power for 16 years? What held them from taking the helm of affairs during this almost decade and a half? And is Angela Merkel stepping down one of the reasons for the CDU not gaining as many votes as the last time?
I can try to explain that. Please, point is, we cannot say that SPD did not poll a huge support from the masses in the previous elections. And convincingly, you will be surprised to know, possibly amused, the last two times when in Berlin, the federal German government was headed by Angela Merkel, and actually still being headed. And like you said earlier in your onset for this talk, that she's going to be in the chancellor's seat until the new government takes in.
Of course.
The Social Democrats, they did poll huge support from the government, but less than the CDU. And in last election in 2017, SPD, incidentally, for multiple reasons, they bagged their worst performance in German political electoral history since the World War II. But on the other hand, in this election, 2021, CDU has performed the worst ever in its political history since the World War II. That means since the foundation of the Federal Republic of Germany. So last two governments in Berlin, they were made. I want to make a correlation between this example and the situation in some of the developing South Asian countries, generally speaking. It's not that, I mean, you take part in an election and then you say, well, since I cannot become the chancellor or head of government or prime minister, then I do not accept the election results and I walk out, or my party members, they will just quit the debate and they will resign from their elected mandates. The last two elections in Germany were clearly won by CDU-CSU, this political parliamentary grouping of the two union parties. But SPD became a part of the coalition government. They called it a junior partner because they showed political maturity, political sense of responsibility. And they said, this whole electoral exercise has cost Germany hundreds of millions of euros, and the result of which, this decision by the masses, we are not going to go to the masses again for a redo of the same exercise. We are not going to waste time. We will show some responsibility. And after this, Merkel's party and government and the administration in power then, they failed to make a governmental alliance with the FDP, the Free Democratic Party, which again is still
Maqbool, last question regarding the German elections and the German governance. Now, Mr. Olaf Scholz has talked about strengthening the European Union with all the different issues that are confronting the European Union. How important is going to be Germany's role in the future as well?
Very much. Key role, fundamental, without any doubt. But let me please also underline that this role of Berlin government in further strengthening and unifying the already united Europe is not going to be something in coming days which would have been dependent on Merkel's party winning or losing the election. Because one thing is we are talking about German elections, but if you look at the whole political scenario at the European level, then all those countries which are members of the European Union, they have their own elected representatives in the Brussels Parliament. They have their own European Union Commission and this whole presidency and the Council of Europe. So they take decisions which are then binding for all the member states, and the member countries' governments are actually less in a position to somehow dictate anything to the European or EU leadership in Brussels. So decisions are taken by the leadership in Brussels and the members of the European Parliament in Brussels and in the Strasbourg in France, and then they are implemented by the parties. And since you said that you are going to almost conclude this talk and the last question, I would just like to remind one thing at the end, very interesting. In the political history of Federal Republic of Germany since World War II, we say that the longest ever ruling German chancellor until now had been the late Mr. Helmut Kohl from the CDU, Merkel's party, who was also Merkel's political mentor. He brought this young lady that time, like a couple of decades ago, actually more than a couple of decades, more than a quarter of a century, of course. He keeps the record with him to have been the longest ever ruling Bundeskanzler or Federal Chancellor of Germany. And now Merkel very much is almost in a position to break this record.
She's been called Kohl's girl as well, and she's called mommy by all the political stalwarts in Germany as well. So of course she leaves behind a legacy nevertheless, but we are looking forward to the new governance by the SPD and Mr. Olaf Scholz to see where he and his coalition take Germany forward, whether it be its country, whether it be the coalition with the other parties, or whether it be the European Union and the globe as a general. There are so many things that Angela Merkel has worked on, whether it be climate change or good governance. Let's see what and how Olaf Scholz takes these things forward. Thank you very much to have joined us. That was, of course, the representative of Deutsche Welle, Maqbool Malik, joining us and talking to us about the parliamentary elections that were held in Germany, and of course what lies ahead as far as Germany and its different policies is concerned. We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom, and our second segment pertains to 1 month since a deadly drone strike in Kabul killed 10 civilians. First of all, something that was denied by the US, saying that it has targeted IS Khorasan, but then of course the Pentagon confirmed the 10 civilians that had been killed in this incident. Now a month has passed by, and today also on Twitter the Taliban issued a statement that accused US forces of violating Afghan airspace and called for upholding commitments as far as the Doha peace deal is concerned. To talk more about that, we've been joined by Khalid. But before we talk to him, let's go to this report.
The dreadful American policies in Afghanistan, followed by chaotic withdrawal, vividly negate the dictates of strategic pragmatism of US-Afghan policy. Apparently repeating the mistakes of past Afghan playbook, US flagrantly violated international law on 29th of August by unilaterally conducting a drone strike which claimed 10 innocent civilian lives in Afghanistan. Unraveling the sheer hypocrisy of international media, the innocent departed souls received no mention or mourning in international media, which has historically turned a blind eye to imperial atrocities. Despite establishment of an interim government in Afghanistan, US encroached on Afghanistan's airspace and violated its territorial integrity. The interim government in Afghanistan is repeatedly urging all countries, and especially US, to respect the international laws and sovereignty of war-ravaged country. According to a recent statement issued by the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan, all countries are the sole owners of territorial and air sovereignty of their states under the international law. Therefore, the Islamic Emirate, as the sole legal entity of Afghanistan, is the guardian of Afghanistan's land and airspace. It is pertinent to mention here that American drone warfare has crystallized heart-wrenching human tragedies in Afghanistan and tribal belt of Pakistan by killing innumerable innocent souls. The United States had to stop drone warfare in Pakistan after raging public outrage and diplomatic pushback by Pakistan. The drone warfare represents one of the most brutal legacy of 9/11, which severely dented humanitarian edifice of modern international law.
Now, if we remember, on the 29th of August this very year, there was a drone strike that the US had claimed had killed IS Khorasan fighters. But in fact, what happened was that it had killed 10 innocent civilians. In the beginning, the statement did not come from the US side. But then, after a couple of days, the Pentagon confirmed that 10 civilian lives had indeed been lost. Since then, we've had statements emanating from the Afghan Taliban, who've condemned not only the killing of the 10 civilians, but also the fact that the unlawful drone strikes continue in Afghanistan without prior information or without the consent of the Afghan Taliban. Zabiullah Mujahid had also condemned the US for failing to inform the Afghan Taliban before ordering the strike and described the US action on foreign soil as unlawful. Now, when we talk of this unlawful action on other soils by the United States of America, there are a list of different countries on which drone attacks have happened. Without going into details of how many attacks happened and in which countries, there is a certain amount of proof that goes and points towards the fact that a lot of foreign soil has been used by the US, with or without the consent. That is also quite debatable, but it has been used to target what the US calls as certain targets that are detrimental or against the interests of the United States of America. Nevertheless, what has happened is that it has also, in the whole gamut of drone strikes, killed many scores of civilians across the globe in different countries. Now, this comes from a country that upholds humanitarian laws and human rights laws, and has been talking about Afghanistan and how Afghanistan is not giving the due rights to its women and some other rights as well, that it is pinpointing on different sectors. Also, the bill has been put forward in the US Senate even today so as to try to punish the Taliban one way or the other, and also those who aid and abet them. Nevertheless, if we go in the whole history of drone strikes, a lot of these drone strikes are done by the US with a certain mindset, with a certain mentality, with a certain drive. I mean, it could be against the basic human rights. I mean, because you kill someone and you do not know whether it is confirmed or unconfirmed is also something that is very debatable. The US always says that the drone strikes that it has conducted have been done after confirmed intel on the sites where the drones have hit. But unfortunately, as we've seen in this latest attack that happened a month back in Kabul, the people who were killed were not terrorists, were not even abettors of terrorists, but in fact were civilians, and that included children. This is not the lone or sole incident in which civilians have been killed in drone strikes, and that is what needs to be understood by the world bodies, including the United States of America, because of course there seems to be some kind of a double standard in the West as far as the drone strikes or the authorization that they ask or do not ask by other countries about the drone strikes is concerned, because we've also known that the US asked Pakistan and Pakistan has refused for its soil to be used against any other country through drone strikes. Nevertheless, 1 month has passed, and we just hope that such drone strikes do not occur in the future, because they undermine human rights values as the US very ably describes them and what talks for them. Let's go to our next story, and that of course concerns the state of Palestine, that has welcomed the decision of the British Labour Party to impose sanctions on Israel. Through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, has welcomed the vote of the members of the annual General Conference of the British Opposition Labour Party that was recently held in Brighton, Southern England, on a resolution that supports the use of sanctions against Israel and calls for the immediate recognition of the state of Palestine in the event that a government is formed. Now, the Labour Party members had voted by a clear majority with a resolution that condemned the ongoing Nakba in Palestine, Israel's military attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque, the deliberate displacement of Sheikh Jarrah in Israel's war on Gaza, and welcomed the International Criminal Court's investigation into the Israeli crimes. Now, this comes as a positive development nevertheless, because there are not many countries apart from Pakistan maybe and a couple of other Muslim countries that have condemned the whole atrocities that the Palestinian people are or have been under since the last couple of decades, with no solution in sight. There are time and again some slight temporary breakthroughs between Israel and Palestine, but nothing concrete happens, even despite the fact that Joe Biden and the current US government, as per their statements, go or want to go for a two-state solution. Nevertheless, they also need to kind of press on Israel to stop these atrocities on Palestine, and also kind of rethink their strategy as far as Israel is concerned. And now let's come to our very last segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns COVID-19. Now, as per the latest statistics in Pakistan has reported 2,970 COVID recoveries, 52 more lives in the country. Islamabad, AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan have collectively reported around 100 COVID cases, Punjab 698 and 195 in KP, 13 in Balochistan. This is of course the official tally as far as the NCOC is concerned. As far as also the NCOC is concerned, now the children of 12 years and above will be eligible for inoculation. The other age groups are already being inoculated as we speak. What lies ahead as far as the next 6 months for COVID-19 is concerned? Well, as far as the latest analyses and reports from the different international media outlets is concerned, there is a lot to do, because across the world there is a huge segment that still has not been vaccinated, and what is being said is that the primary and the primordial thing that needs to be done in the days and the weeks ahead in order for this pandemic not to further mutate this virus, or for not more people to get this disease, is that more and more people get themselves vaccinated, because even if you get the disease after being vaccinated, the symptoms and signs are very mild as compared to those who have not been vaccinated. But herein lies a dilemma, because there is a certain section across the world, including in Pakistan, that does not believe in getting oneself vaccinated. Different theories on bound, and we've discussed that on our different shows in the past as well. Nevertheless, what is pertinent to understand and to decipher is that this is something that is here to stay. We are not going to get rid of COVID-19 in the next 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or even more. But what we can do is to prevent ourselves and our families from getting this virus. And how can we do that? Very simple things. get yourselves vaccinated. First of all, there are different vaccines. As far as Pakistan is concerned, there are so many different kinds of vaccines that are available, whether it be Sinovac, Sinopharm, or Pfizer, or Moderna. AstraZeneca has been available in the past as well. Get yourselves vaccinated at the earliest, whether you are a child, whether you are an early adult, whether you are an elderly person or a middle-aged person. Get yourself vaccinated. Secondly, even if you are vaccinated, follow the standard operating procedures. Very simple to do. Wear your mask, keep a social distance, avoid crowded places. That is the only way you can prevent yourselves and your loved ones from getting it. These are simple rules and procedures that you need to follow. I hope the message gets across. This is what I always end my show with. Follow the SOPs and get yourselves vaccinated. This is how our society, our nation can control the pandemic, as our government has been doing so with the past. This will also avoid further shutdowns in the future if this pandemic persists and further escalates. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.